For the next hour, you'll be leaving the show me state and entering the show me the money state. So stop what you're doing, grab a pen, and get ready to learn. Randy and Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group will be your guides for straight talk and honest answers about living the life you deserve in retirement. So prepare to be empowered. Now, here are your Show Me the Money hosts, Randy Floyd, Jake Floyd, and Jeff Shade.
Thank you so much. Good morning and welcome to Show Me the Money with Randy and Jake Floyd, radio show that gives you the straight talk and honest answers you need to help reach your wealth management and retirement goals through smart investing and careful planning. On today's show, we're going to be talking about why experts are saying an economic recession could be looming. Also, why many older adults lack financial security, what to do about it. We'll talk about 10 tax topics that every retiree should know about, and what is a MYGA and how is it used in retirement planning. My name's Jeff Shade, and as always, I'm just here to ask the questions, but the words of wisdom and solid advice, they come from Randy and Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group. Hey, Randy, how you doing today?
You know, I'm doing so well, Jeff. I've heard people say that if I was any better, I would be twins.
Well, I'm glad you're doing well, Randy. And Jake, how are you doing this fine Saturday morning, my friend?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thanks for asking.
Certainly welcome. Hope our listeners are having a great last day of March. Well, it's not the last day of March yet, but it is going to be the last day here in a couple of days or so. March is going out like a lamb. Well, I want to start off the show today by talking about recession. You know, I've been reading about recession in the news lately. People have been throwing it around. I'm wondering whether it's a clickbait or not, but I read it anyway. So I thought about talking about some of the signs that we could be in for a recession. The first one is high interest rates. Now, we do have high interest rates. Is there much stock that we should put into that, do you think?
Well, Jeff, it's interesting that you bring up this term recession. I remember in school when recession was a good thing, right? When we got to go out and play. But recession in this case is not good, right? But high interest rates, I think we need to kind of put this in perspective a little bit. Yes, interest rates are higher than what we got used to back when we were on low interest crack cocaine, you know, for so many years where we basically had 2.5% and 3% interest rates on homes. You know, historically, if we look back, interest rates on homes have been actually about 7 average over the last 50 years or so. Now, does that mean that they're not high in terms of today and what we're used to? Yes, it does. And with the spiraling cost of housing and things of that nature, it's really causing people to take a pause and slow down and really measure and look at what they're doing. So, yeah, I mean, it is a concern. And, of course, Jerome Powell has said that he thinks maybe still, you know, we might have 2 interest rate declines later this year. But then recently I just saw a guy said, well, maybe it'll be 1 is what we're looking for before the end of the year. But I do think interest rates will soften. But that doesn't mean right now it's not a problem.
Yeah, and high interest rates are just one of the factors that could point to a recession. As I said, there are about 10 of them. The next one is persistent inflation. We have been trying to get this inflation down to 2% for quite some time now. Do you think that that is a realistic goal? And I think as we're talking right now, what is it, around 3%, something like that?
I think one of the reasons they use the word target, Jeff, is because that's what it is. It's a target. You're never going to be at 2%. You're going to be above it, trying to get back down to 2%. Or if you have a recession, you're going to be way below it, trying to get back up to 2%. And a lot of people with shorter term memories here forget that for a very long time, we were trying to get up to 2%. For the last 3 years or so, we've been trying to get down to 2%, 4 years, I guess, at this point. So I think it is a target. I do think that we'll probably keep that target for the longer term. The Fed's future and what that looks like over the next 20, 30 years is a little bit in question. The Vivek Ramaswamis out there would have them. So the Fed has basically a dual mandate. They want maximum employment and price stability. The problem is very many times, especially right now, those two things are in conflict with each other. So in order to create maximum employment, you're going to create inflation. And so Vivek Ramaswamy has been a proponent of saying, hey, let's ditch the dual mandate. Let's just make it only about price stability. And we'll let the jobs market be the jobs market, and we won't worry about that. So I think that as we look forward to what the Fed's going to do in the future, again, for the foreseeable future, I think we're going to see this 2% target be the law of the land, if you will. But Long term, I do think there's a lot of people both on the left and the right that question whether we need the Fed and what role they should play looking forward. I personally think we do need the Fed to some extent, or maybe we don't need them, but it certainly makes markets behave in a manner that's a little bit more rational. The reason we don't have 80 and 90% corrections in the market is because the Fed is there to help backstop us and allay panic and things like that. But I do think that we should probably, every 20 years or so, we should probably look at the Fed and go, hey, are they still doing what we really wanted them to do when we set out to start this whole endeavor?
Yeah, Jake, it's been floated again just recently that we should probably do away with the Fed. And I think you're right. I think it's something that needs to be there. People don't like uncertainty, right? So if we did away with the Fed, how would people feel?
Yeah.
it'd be Katie bar the door on interest rates, and it would just simply be, though, I mean, if you think about it, it would be supply and demand, which is not a bad thing, actually.
Well, let me tell you, though, people think markets are brutal now. If you had no Fed, the markets would be very brutal.
Yeah.
That being said, it would create an environment where you could potentially make a lot more money a lot faster, but you could also get hurt a lot faster because the Fed is almost like this opiate for the markets where things get bad or too good even. You know, the market can kind of smooth the ride out by the Fed turning the screws this way or that way.
We're talking about some of the signs that a recession may be looming with Randy and Jake of Floyd Financial Group. You're hearing the program right now. You're interested in getting in and talking with Randy and Jake at Floyd Financial Group. We are offering this no-cost, no-obligation Floyd Financial Group review. You can get yours by calling 417-889-7233, 417-889-7233. Make that call right now. Leave your name, telephone number. Ashley will call you back next week and set you up with an appointment. So we've talked about high interest rates and persistent inflation. The next one is slower consumer spending. How much slower is consumer spending right now?
I know they had a report here a few days ago, maybe 8 or 10 days ago. I don't remember the exact results of that, but I do know that consumer confidence is slightly down from where it was. I will say this, though. I think a lot of it is it's just part of the cycle. As we had all that money come in from COVID, you know, $6.5 trillion of new money basically hit the coffers out there and hit people's pockets in many different ways. Money sent in the mail, the helicopter money we sometimes call that, to all the child tax credits and all those things that happened. But now that's kind of come to an end, and the water's kind of being cut off a little bit there. They've run through, or they let that slip through their hands, what came through there. And then they also spent a bunch because everybody was sitting at home and everybody was being marketed to continually, as we always are, right? But we said, hey, honey, we could get that, and that would help us to get through COVID, right? Yeah, okay. So anyway, all these different things happened. And then, of course, with all that extra money being printed and things, the price of cars and houses and everything went higher. I read the other day that the average car payment now is $700 a month.
Oh, my gosh.
$700. And I thought, can that really be right?
Well, especially when you consider what people are paying for rent or housing and then the average salaries in the 60s or 70s. I mean, that doesn't leave a lot of room for error. And I think people are feeling that. And so as we look forward here, I think that Randy has talked about in the past many times on this show that when it comes to the debt, when it comes to recession, there's a saying in corporate America that says, sales cures all ills. If we as a country grow our way out of this problem, that is the best way for us to get out of this problem. We can't cut enough spending to fix the problem, so we have to cut, but we also have to grow. And so I think that is what's going to happen here. Personally, I don't think either Randy or I are in the recession camp over the next 6 months or a year. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible to have a recession. I'm not saying that. I'm just simply saying, if you said, Jake, do you think we're going to have a recession? I personally don't think so. I think that we have a nice big backstop with the Fed, which we just talked about, meaning they could cut up to 17 quarter-point rate cuts before they get to zero.
Right.
Which is a lot of ammunition to throw at a weakening jobs market or economy if we even have one. That's one thing that people don't really understand is that we don't even have that yet. Right now, this is all just fear to this point.
Right.
And so, like with a lot of fear drawdowns, it was very sharp down first, and then we've bounced up some. The next move is a little bit in question, but I think that this is the stock market. And if you're invested in the stock market, 5 or 10% moves should not be the end of your world. Otherwise, you may not belong in the stock market, and that's okay. And when we put plans together, not everybody's in the stock market. And the people that are in the stock market, we usually have other buckets of money for people that are not directly in the stock market that'll help us to handle some of the volatility. But ultimately, we have a little bit of short memory syndrome here because it's just been a couple of years since we had any real volatility. And so now that it's coming back, people are like, wait, I thought the market was supposed to go up forever. And we got Trump in, and why is it not going up? Have a little patience, and it will go up. But I will say that it could get a little worse before it gets better, too.
And Jake, you went ahead and answered my last question here. So, my last question was going to be, do you or Randy think that we're going to have a recession anytime soon? And you're saying that you really don't think so anytime soon, that is in the next 6 months or so. Labor market softening, that is another sign that we could be in for a recession. How are we doing with the labor market right now? I occasionally see these layoffs of various and sundry companies.
Yeah, I think the layoffs actually have slowed down a little bit, though, from where they were at their high. Again, I think when all this money was floating around through the PPP loans and all this stuff during COVID, we saw people hire, especially in the technology sector, and maybe it's due to AI a little bit. We saw the technology sector just hire.
Well, and let's quantify this a little bit. So let's say that 0 on a scale of 0 to 100, 0 being the worst possible jobs market, nobody has a job, and 100 being the best jobs market we've ever experienced in the history of our nation. We've been hovering about a 97 or 8. We've been having a very good jobs market, and that jobs market has slowed to 94 or something. And to Randy's point, a lot of it is not really them cutting jobs that they need. It's cutting jobs that they overhired that they didn't need. And so they're just simply becoming a little more efficient. So it's definitely not time to sound the alarm just yet. Again, is it possible that we have a recession here? It is 100% possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying we're worrying about things that aren't there, at least at this point. Now, as the situation changes, we will accommodate that. But I think so far, this is just fear. So if people will just relax a little bit and say, hey, the market goes up, the market goes down, I do think 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to be much, much, much higher than we are right now. However, the next 2 or 3 months is far less certain.
On a scale of 1 to 10, Jake, 1 being absolutely no recession, 10 being that it is imminent, where do you think we stand right now for a recession in the next 6 months or even year?
I'd say probably a 2 to 3.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say 3.
It's kind of where I would land it. Just depending on what happens here, there's a whole lot going on in the world right now and all the geopolitical stuff. And of course, I guess geopolitical is tariffs, it is taxes, it is drilling for oil, it is the price of oil and getting it reduced. All those things are coming into play.
And while I don't think that a recession is imminent, a recession is a healthy part of an economy. Things have to ebb and flow. We can't just go straight up forever. So even if we were to have a recession, that gets us geared up for the next leg higher, both market-wise and economy-wise. There would also be a lot of positives from having a recession. If we have a real recession, the Fed will lower interest rates, which will ignite the housing market. It'll allow us to refinance our gigantic debt that we have in this country. But it would also allow consumers to then refinance their credit card debt by taking another loan out on their house. There's a lot of positives, even if we do have a recession, which I'm not saying we're going to. Like we said, we think maybe a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10 likelihood of recession. But even if we get a recession, we'll use that to our advantage too.
So a lot of people wouldn't know who Lionel Sanders is, but Lionel Sanders is a triathlete. And I've watched him over the years. He's getting to be an older triathlete now. He's like 37, which is a grandpa in triathlon.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like a mummy, in triathlon myself. But one of the things that he talks about on there is pushing himself to train. Well, as we are growing and expanding business, we're pushing ourselves, right? And we're always pushing our business to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. But he says this. He says you can overtrain, and if you don't stop and let yourself recover, that is, let your body, after you've pushed hard, let your body recover, you will eventually come to the end of yourself. It's no different in business. Business will run. Then we get kind of out on the raggedy edge. We got to get our arms back around our business. And that's what Jake is talking about. Business has always operated in cycles, just like our bodies. Jeff, I'll tell you, if you don't go to sleep one of these days, you'll wake up tired one morning.
If I don't go to sleep, I'll wake up tired. Okay, I got you. I know what you're saying, Randy.
You won't know. You won't even know you went to sleep.
Where did you go to school again, Randy?
I went to Bradleyville.
Bradleyville High School. God bless them down there. Talking with Randy and Jake of Floyd Financial Group, we're talking about the possibility of a recession. And again, we really think that there's only a 2 in 10 chance of a recession here, so wouldn't worry about that. If you'd like to come in and sit down and talk with Randy and Jake about your individual situation, again, we're offering it at no cost, no obligation, no judgment. This Floyd Financial Group review, you can get yours by calling 417-889-7233. Call this weekend, leave your name, number. Ashley will call you back during the week and set up that conversation. 417-889-7233. Our website is floydfinancialgroup.com. Time for a break, Randy and Jake. When we come back, we'll be talking about the fact that many older adults lack financial security and what can we do about it. All that and more when Show Me the Money continues here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
Ready for another helping of some more real money talk? Thought so. Now, here's another serving of Show Me the Money with your hosts, Randy and Jake Floyd, with Jeff Shade.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Randy and Jake. You're listening to Show Me the Money, and in this segment, we're going to be talking about, it says older adults lack financial security here. You know, what is older now, Jeff? I mean,
I don't know.
That's what we're talking about here is the lack of financial security, and I think that can be at any age, but we specifically on here are talking about people that are at or near or in retirement.
Yeah, and I can understand younger people not knowing about this sort of thing. I was not taught it. At least my generation didn't teach this. And I understand in Bradleyville High School, class of, we're not going to say what year it was, but did you have much financial training down at Bradleyville High School? Do they really teach you about compound interest and things like that?
That's funny, Jeff.
Well, that's really that's a great question. So my grandpa was a farmer, and he was, during the Depression, he was a young lad. His dad died early.
Yeah.
He became a man at the house at age 8.
Yeah.
And so he was a very, very frugal and conservative individual. So did I have a little bit of training in that area? Yeah, he always said, don't spend anything. Basically his motto.
Yep.
And then, of course, we came along, and I remember, do you remember like one of the first credit cards, what it was?
I think they called it like a master charge or something like that, as I recall. I don't know.
Bank AmeriCard.
Bank AmeriCard. Okay. Yeah, I remember my aunt
Bank
in
of
Tennessee.
America did that.
She had a Bank AmeriCard, and she thought she'd died and gone to heaven.
So, yeah, so the idea of using credit to buy things ahead other than, buying a farm or something in the day, that was really when that concept was first pioneered. That would have probably been the late 60s. Prior to that, people just didn't really charge. Like now, there's this thing called Klarna, and then what are the other ones out there, Jake?
For
if you want to go buy a bowling ball that's $80, you can pay it off in 6 easy payments.
That's right. That's absolutely 100%.
Yeah. Have we been educated by the financial system? I would say the answer to that. That's it. In fact, I'll tell you a story, and people will find this interesting, but they can probably relate. I remember when my wife came in and said, guess what? I said, what? She said, we now own Jake. He's ours.
You own Jake. Oh, you pay. I see what you say.
Paid off the medical bills from the...
Okay.
Yeah, she had a C-section, and we had some insurance, but it didn't pay for the whole thing, so we had to pay on payments.
They could have repossessed you, Jake. I don't know what they would have done with you, but...
Well, I'm glad that didn't happen. I had great parents.
No, we didn't do a very good job of teaching people, and we never have. And I don't know that we do now. I think it may be some better because there's just more awareness in general that, hey, one day you're not going to be able to work.
You can always start a TikTok account. I think that people are more aware of what's possible. However, I think they may be less aware of how to get it than they ever have been. And so that's part of what's wrong with the socioeconomic divergence, if you will, in society, I think, is that people know your millionaire next door that got lucky and became a YouTuber or something, but there's no path for them to understand how to get there, I think, is a lot of it. And it creates this distortion about going to work and earning 15 or 20 bucks an hour where they're not grateful for that. They're not willing to work for that because they're jealous of their neighbor who got lucky on something, right? So I think that people believe now that hard work really has nothing to do with it, or at least a lot of the younger generations do. I know everybody listening to this show understands about hard work, and certainly that is the way of the world. But I think that there's a lot of people that are 35 and younger now that don't really see it that way, and they're just kind of waiting for their big break. Well, I'll tell you what, you got your big break. You were born at this time in this country. You're already a lottery winner.
But I know what you're saying. I did not have really any financial education going through formal high school and college, that sort of thing. I learned it all from people like you. And I really wonder about young people today. Now, Trevor's 13 years old. Do they teach him any sort of financial things in school, or does everything that he learns come from you?
I think most of it just comes from me at this point. You know, I'm hopeful that as he gets a little older, there'll be more of that. But honestly, I don't think that that's probably going to be the case. I think that he gets more than an earful from me about it, as you can imagine. Right. I think it is something that needs to be taught in the home, but the problem is not everybody has a home situation that will teach it to them.
Right.
I know that while Randy did not grow up with a lot of money here, and that my grandparents were not overly wealthy, he wasn't afraid of a hard day's work or 2 or 3 in 1. Because of that, never really went without, because he was willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. And I think that if you have somebody like that in your lineage, you have a grandfather or even a great-grandfather that teaches his son, and he teaches his son, and he teaches his son, I think that that's how it really should get passed along. And I do think that this era of toxic masculinity is partially to blame for that too, where being a man and working hard is not really smiled upon by society. And so I think that once that kind of gets fixed, I think some of that will go back to the way it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, I think the value of hard work has been lost on a generation here, and I admire those people. We were talking off the air about the waitress in the restaurant who has to work because she's trying to afford an apartment in the community that's going to give her child the best education, or the fellow out here that cuts my grass and does the lawn and so forth to provide a nice house for his wife and his children. He just bought his first house. And I think that is something that's gone by the wayside, unfortunately. I think about my grandparents. I mean, they were tobacco farmers, actually. My mom used to always say, y'all kids don't know the value of a dollar, because she was from Tennessee, and she remembers growing up post-Depression, and money was tight.
Yeah.
But I think these days, people in general don't understand things like compound interest. They don't understand what an annuity is. They don't understand the ways to save. Do you find that people who come in and talk to you say, Jake, Randy, I don't know what you talked about here. I don't understand anything that you said, but I think you know what you're doing.
So I think that people who are savers by nature, you know, that have been taught by their parents, they absolutely understand compound interest. And that's a question that we get a lot. If I have people that really like CDs or savings accounts come in to see me, like, well, how often does it compound? I mean, that's a great question to ask and to answer. I will say, though, that people that have a 401k and really haven't given it a whole lot of thought and just funded that 401k and forgot about it and ended up with a bunch of money, a lot of those people don't really understand compounding of interest and that kind of thing. And that's not right or wrong. It's just a little bit of a, you know, what you were taught as you were growing up. A lot of people that are big on saving money, they had parents or grandparents that were alive during the Depression, like you were just talking about. And so you didn't buy a new pair of shoes. You go to Goodwill and find some and buy those, or fix the soles on the one you got, versus, you know, everything's disposable and throwaway these days, comparatively speaking, and things don't really get reused. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way there. I'm just saying I think how you're raised really has a lot to do with that.
You know, I hadn't thought about that, Jake, but you're right. I remember when I used to get new heels on my shoes and get new soles on your shoes. They would go in there, they would sew them on.
Yeah.
And they were leather.
Wow.
On your dress shoes, right? But nobody does that stuff anymore. Like you said, it's kind of a throwaway society. But anyway, I guess we should get back on topic here. Financial security, where does it come from, right?
Yeah.
Well, it comes from having a good plan, from working a plan, understanding where you want to go, reverse engineering the plan to get there. Certainly, we can help people here at Floyd Financial Group to do that. That is really what we do here. I guess one of the things we should talk about here is just some of the asset classes that people have and what they can use for retirement income.
Right, and there's cash equivalents. We certainly know what cash is. Cash equivalents would be things such as CDs, money markets that don't pay a lot. But what are some of the other asset classes that people should really know about if they're planning for retirement or already in retirement?
Yeah, when you look at asset classes in general, the high 30,000-foot view says, well, we got stocks, we got bonds, we got CDs, and we got savings accounts. But then beyond that, there's derivatives of all that stuff, and then there's real estate, and there's commodities, and there's many, many, many things that people can invest in. Now, when I look at retirees or people that are near retirement, we have to start to look at, yes, we want to make a great return on our money, but we also need to make sure that we don't take too much risk and that we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, if we have one of these downturns like we've just had. But you're right. As a country, we just don't really educate people enough. I mean, one of the big things that we're hearing out here now is all the problems with Social Security, right, with Elon Musk and Doge and all the things that's going on out there with that. And I think that sometimes people, if you aren't careful, your mind can run away with you. I remember one time my dad, this was way back in like 1977, I was sitting out on the edge of the dock over there. We used to have an apple orchard in Washington State, and I was sitting out there. I just had this girl I'd been dating for a period of time, and I'd moved and left her back in another city, and so I was out there, and I was kind of forlorn looking off into the distance, and he walks up and he says, and this is the way my dad would speak. Now, he was a country boy. You're thinking about that rotten, didn't mean she was rotten.
Right.
He says, but you're thinking about that girl, aren't you? I said, yeah. He said, Randy, thoughts will kill you. And I've thought about that a lot. And at the time, I'm like, okay, whatever. But what he's talking about is how you think about things, and your perception of things is everything.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things that we try to do here at Floyd Financial Group is help people to really get a grasp on how these financial tools work, what makes them work as much as they want to. Now, I don't want to go way off into the weeds and leave people scratching their head, but I like to educate people as much as we can while they're sitting in here about asset classes, why we use them, how we build stability, how we build some protection into their portfolios. And people appreciate knowing. And as they are with us here, they work with us over the years, they really come to understand a lot of what's going on, and it really helps them to settle in and not have to worry about looking back over their shoulder all the time about, is my retirement going to last? So they can just really enjoy their grandkids and their time off after working 40, 50 years.
Yeah, and I think the long and short of this conversation is if you're looking for a financial advisor, you're not looking for a salesperson. You really should look for somebody who has the heart of a teacher. That is what we pride ourselves on here at Floyd Financial Group. So if you've got questions, you want somebody who has the heart of a teacher, who wants to sit down with you, talk to you, and help you understand your investments and how they could make your life better, call us here at Floyd Financial Group. Request your no-cost, no-obligation, no-judgment financial review. It's a casual conversation with Randy or Jake. 417-889-7233 is our telephone number, 417-889-7233. You can also find out more about us online at FloydFinancialGroup.com. Time for a break. Randy and Jake, we're going to come right back here on Show Me the Money, and we're going to be talking about 10 tax topics that every retiree should know when our program continues here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
We're back with your financial catch of the day, and it's a big one. Here's more Show Me the Money Radio with your hosts, Randy Floyd, Jake Floyd, and Jeff Shea.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Randy and Jake. You're listening to Show Me the Money, and in this segment, we're going to talk about taxes, the top 10 topics every retiree should know about.
Randy, I don't think I've ever heard anybody sing the word taxes and be so joyful as you are. It sounds like you're a person who understands taxes and who really got them under control. But a lot of folks, don't understand taxes. They certainly don't have them under control. The IRS is a mystery. The tax code is bigger than War and Peace. And You know, we're just afraid of the IRS, so we pay whatever they happen to say that we should pay. And many times we're paying more in taxes than we actually have to. So let's talk about some of the top 10 tax topics retirees should know about. RMDs is number one on the list. How do they play into our conversation about taxes?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. For us here, it's kind of normal when people hit a certain age, we know they're going to have to take RMDs, which are required minimum distributions on their IRAs. However, most people go, hey, I got this letter. What's an RMD? So they get the letter from the financial institution that says, hey, this year, based on your year-end value of your IRA, you may have to take this much in required minimum distribution. So what it amounts to is the government allowed you to fund your 401k or your IRA all those years, and you got a tax deduction for what you put in there. And, of course, now it's time for you to pay the piper because all that money you put in there plus all the growth now comes out taxable. Now, some recent changes have happened. Used to be by April 1st, following the year you turned 70 and 1/2 is when you had to take your first RMD. What a deal. Our government at work, right? So now, though, it's 73 for everybody listening on here now. If you haven't already turned 72, it'll be 73 for you to have to take your first RMD. And for those born later, it's even going to be as high as age 75 before you have to take it. Kind of interesting to me that here we are, as a country, we need more tax revenue and we're pushing the RMD age. And we know that the people 65 and older in this country control most of the wealth, and a lot of it is in IRAs. So again, our government at work, kind of interesting. But one thing you should really know about the RMD, it used to be if you didn't take your required minimum distribution, the government would tax you 50% of what it was. It's been reduced, though, in the Secure Act 2 down to 25%, which is still very egregious. So you need to know what's important. When do I need to start taking my RMD?
All right. So the summary of this is that you're putting money in, but you're able to deduct that money from your taxes if you're putting it into some sort of an investment. But when it comes time for the required minimum distribution, the IRS wants you to take it because they want you to pay taxes on that. And a lot of people don't realize that these RMD withdrawals are indeed taxed. So that is our first topic that we want you to be aware of is RMD. Second one, Social Security benefits. It wasn't always taxed. Wasn't it Ronald Reagan, and I'm going to say about maybe, 1984 or so, that said, hey, we need some money, so we're going to tax Social Security benefits?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact date that it started, but just rest assured that it is taxable if you make too much money, according to the government, I guess.
How can you make too much money?
Well, that's kind of like excess funds.
Oh,
have you ever had excess funds?
Not really, no.
So we know that our governments do that sometime, and they fight like they can to spend it so they don't have to give it back if they get it reallocated next year. But basically, Social Security, yes, can be taxed today. It depends on what your income is, and about 40% of people who get Social Security income pay on their benefits. So a married couple filing jointly could pay up to as much as 85 cents on the dollar, but you're going to pay up to 50% if you're between $32,000 and $44,000 a year in taxable income. And above $44,000, you pay taxes on 85 cents of every dollar you get. So it's never 100%. And again, we're not talking about 85 cents or 85% as a tax. We're saying that 85% of what your monthly Social Security benefit would be subject to tax if your taxable income is above the $44,000. If it's between $32,000 and $44,000, you're going to pay on half. If it's below $32,000, you may not pay any tax on Social Security. And of course, it is wise for us to mention that 2024 was the first year that we didn't have to pay taxes on Social Security at the state level, and so we won't have to this year in 2025 either.
So that's all income, Randy. That includes Social Security and pensions. If it exceeds, let's say, $44,000, you're going to be paying on up to 85% of those benefits.
Yes, that's correct. It's just one of those things that, you're kind of danged if you do and danged if you don't. So if you're not paying taxes, you probably wish you were because you'd like to have more income. And if you are, you probably don't like that either.
Oh, right. Now, if you are a veteran and you're getting veterans benefits, let's say disability benefits, those are not taxed. And then if you have Social Security in addition to the veterans benefits, it's a possibility that you're not going to pay any taxes.
That is correct. So there's many different asset classes that go into figuring Social Security taxable benefits. Some people say, well, I have tax-free bonds. Well, tax-free bonds doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to pay on your Social Security because it goes into the calculation. The other thing is people say, well, I have disability income, so SSDI is going to be subject to tax. SSI is not subject to tax. You can also look at if you have, at the state level, if you have pension income from a municipality or a state, you could be exempt for paying on state taxes while you still make you pay taxes at the federal level. So there's a lot of different combinations. I will say this too, if you have Roth IRAs don't produce any type of a tax document. And so if you've got an IRA that you're thinking of converting, I would tell you that you need to be careful about doing that. For some people, it makes really good sense to convert. For other people, it does not. If you want to have help on working on your tax picture, give us a call. We're happy to sit down with you.
We're talking about tax topics that every retiree should know about. We talked about RMDs and Social Security. Let's talk about healthcare costs, Randy. Healthcare expenses, one of the biggest expenses that we'll have in retirement. But if you have enough healthcare expenses, they are tax deductible. Is that wrong or right?
No, that is right. There's still deductions for, it used to be 7.5%. I think it's 10% of your adjusted gross income now is what it has to be before it's deductible. So that can be a lot in today's world, but once in a while, the health care can get out of hand, and it's something that you should be aware of, that it's out there. And if you got a good tax preparer, he's going to ask you, hey, did you have any excessive health care costs this year? And if they do, they'll factor that right into your tax return.
We're talking about 10 tax topics that every retiree should know about. We've talked about health care costs. Let's talk about state income taxes. Now, Randy, Missouri does have a state income tax, doesn't it?
Yes, they do. And it's kind of on a sliding scale depending on how much you earn. But the maximum right now, I think, is 4.90. Used to be a little higher than that, up to 5.9, but they had a tax reduction in Missouri a couple of years ago.
All right. So we're kind of lucky in Missouri when you look at some other states. I mean, for example, in the state of California, the state tax could be up to 13.5%. So, those are for what they consider higher income earners. But I think in order to live in California, you've got to be a higher income earner. And that's just the way it is. So when you couple your 37% with your 13 plus whatever it is, many Californians are paying more than 50% in taxes just to live in a state that is in such a state of decline. But I'm not going to get into that anymore, being a former Californian. I think I'm able to talk about that. Tax credits and deductions. What do we need to know about a tax credit and a deduction? What is the difference between those two?
So, tax credits are one of the things, those things that can kind of come and go. For the longest time, to buy a Tesla or some type of an electric car, we had tax credits for those. We have tax credits for solar panels on top of your house. And let's talk about a tax credit versus a deduction right up front. So a tax credit is, let's say you figure your taxes and you owe $5,000 in taxes, but you have a $5,000 tax credit because of solar panels. That means that it wipes your $5,000 tax bill out. A tax deduction of $5,000 just reduces your taxable income. So big difference between tax credits and tax deductions. I just want to make that very clear. Now, if you're over 65, you get some special additions to the standard deduction. For married couples right now, it's $30,000 a year. And I think it's an additional $1,800 if you're over 65 that you get to take right off the top of your income, and helps you to reduce your taxable income each year. So just know there's several things you need to know. If you hire somebody to do your taxes, they're going to talk about all these different things and know how that works. But you should know that there are tax credits for certain things, tax deductions for certain things. Used to be when you gave to charity, we got to do that, what was called above the line. We got to take charitable deductions off, plus we got our standard deduction. Anymore, you have to exceed the standard deduction before you get credit for your charitable contributions.
Next one I want to talk about is estate taxes, but the limit for estate taxes is actually quite high, isn't it?
Way up there. It's 13, 14 million per person if you're married, right. So it'd be twice that. And way back, I don't know how long it would have been now, when it used to be 640,000 was the number, but it's been probably since the 90s when that was effective. Before the tax cuts in 2017 that Trump put into place, it was closer to around 3 million, I think. So in today's world, the 14 million per head, which is roughly what it is, not going to affect a lot of people. But for those that it does affect, it's going to be very important that you do some tax planning around that.
Right, and there's also taxes on gifts. I mean, I think that each person can give, like $19,000 or something like that before it is taxable. So if you're wanting to, let's say, gift a child $50,000 for a house, you're going to pay tax on the difference between $50,000 and $19,000.
Actually, let's go back and let's explore that just a minute, Jeff. So what it really means is, so over your lifetime, you have an estate tax exclusion number. The estate tax exclusion is that $13.99 million per person. When you are gifting money, it's $18,000, I think the number is. It might have gone to 19 this year.
Yeah, I think it's 19 now.
When you're gifting money to anyone, as my mom used to say, a rake stranger, or it could be your kids, it's important that if you breach that number that you file a 709. And the 709, what it does is it keeps track of the money you've gifted above that 19,000, and they apply that against your exemption number, which is that 13.99 million right now at your death. So it's important to file the 709, and the only reason you do it, you don't owe any taxes necessary. Now, if you take it out of a retirement account, yes, you're probably going to owe taxes on it because all that money's never been taxed. But if you take it out of your savings account, or however you give it to them, it's not going to create taxation for them, and it's not going to create any additional taxation for you as the giver.
We're talking about taxation with Randy Floyd of Floyd Financial Group. And again, if you have questions that you'd like to talk to Randy or Jake about, call us here at 417-889-7233. Set up your casual conversation with Randy and Jake. It's no tie zone here at Floyd Financial Group. Just a casual environment for you to ask the questions that you need the answers to put you on a path towards a confident retirement. We're going to take a break, Randy and Jake. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the MYGA, the multi-year guaranteed annuity, when our show continues here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
People of the Ozarks, step away from the fishing pole and prepare to be shown the money, because we're back with more straight talk and honest answers with Randy Floyd, Jake Floyd, and Jeff Shea.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Randy and Jake. You're listening to Show Me the Money, and in this segment, we're going to talk about a really strange-sounding thing, Jeff. It's called a MYGA.
All right, a MYGA versus a YORGA, MYGA. So the first obvious question, Randy, is what is an MYGA, a MYGA?
This is not to be confused with MAGA either, right? So,
yeah, right. Okay.
So a MYGA is what's called a multi-year guaranteed annuity. And people say, well, what in the world is that? Number one, let's talk about what an annuity is. So there's many variations to annuities. There's immediate annuities, there's tax-deferred annuities, there's tax-sheltered annuities that teachers used to use a lot. Right. There's all kinds of annuities out there, but this really is going to mirror closest to a CD, a certificate of deposit, like where you go to the bank, Jeff, and you say, hey, I got this money. I don't need it for a while. I'd like to collect some interest on it. And they offer you a term of somewhere between 6 months to probably 5 years. Well, the difference is that's with a bank. And when you do an annuity, you do it with an insurance company. All annuities are issued by insurance companies. So the MYGA says multi-year guarantee, meaning if you sign up at a 5% interest rate, that MYGA is going to pay 5% interest each year for whatever the term is, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever you sign up for. It's a good way for those people that are risk averse and for those that are looking for a guaranteed outcome from a product. So if you put $100,000 on deposit and you're earning 5% per year on that, you're going to be able to take $5,000 a year out of there and spend it. Conversely, if you have $1 million, as I say conversely, in addition, if you have $1 million that you put into a 5% MYGA, you're going to collect $50,000 a year at the end of that term. You get all your money back and you can go again or do something different. So the MYGA can be a very, very good tool to generate guaranteed income. It also is a good way to generate just returns, and you don't have to spend the money each year. You can let that money grow, and it grows tax deferred. Whereas interest on a CD, unless it's inside a retirement account, an IRA, you will get a 1099 each year, and you will pay the taxes on the interest earned.
So we talked about annuities before, and I'm familiar with, immediate and deferred annuities, fixed index, variable annuities. Are MYGAs a relatively new product?
No, MYGAs are probably the oldest of annuity type product that's out there.
We've never talked about them, though. That's interesting.
And the reason is a lot of times we didn't talk about them because for so many years when interest rates were, the Federal Reserve sets interest rates, right? So when they're 1% and MYGAs are paying 1.5%, that's not too exciting. So when I tell my client, hey, you can get $15,000 a year on your $1 million, they go, maybe we won't do that. So it's more exciting now because interest rates are higher. There is one thing that I would like to point out to people. Banks, because they're tied directly to the Federal Reserve and what Jerome Powell does, because banks have two sources to get money, right? They get it from the Federal Reserve or they get it from us as depositors into CDs and savings accounts and things like that. What happens is when interest rates are low at the Federal Reserve, that tends to push them down as to what banks will pay you locally. And they move very rapidly right in lockstep with the Federal Reserve. Whereas insurance companies tend to lag on the front end and the back end, meaning this. When Jerome Powell spiked interest rates in 2022, banks were really quick to go up and mirror what the Fed did. Annuities lagged behind a little bit because the underlying asset for an insurance company on a MYGA is some type of a bond. Generally, a lot of times it's government bonds. And so the government bonds are taken out for a period of time. And so that time value lags the current interest rate by a little bit. But on the other side of that, when interest rates start to go down at the banks, the annuity contracts and the insurance companies will have a much longer high interest rate horizon than the banks will. So they both kind of mirror what the Fed does, but one lags the other. The biggest thing I tell people is just make sure that you get the right term and that you like the interest rate that you're signing up for, and everything else will take care of itself.
Talking with Randy and Jake Floyd, Floyd Financial Group. We're talking about MYGAs, multi-year guaranteed annuities. If you've got questions, 417-889-7233 is our number. You can make that call right now. Leave your name, number. Ashley will call you back during the week and set up an appointment for you to come in and talk about MYGAs or any other annuity or basically anything that's on your mind insofar as your retirement journey goes. So we're talking about some of the benefits of the MYGA here. MYGAs are fixed annuities. They're not subject to market volatility, and they're a safe option for retirees or those nearing retirement. What are some of the other benefits of a MYGA? Let's talk about taxes, for example.
Sure. Again, on the tax perspective, as long as you don't spend money out of it, you tax defer all of your earnings, which actually gives you a little better rate of return. So let's say that you are paying 20% in taxes between state and Fed, and you've got a CD, and it earns 5%. Well, at the end of the year, you're going to pay that 20% tax burden on whatever you've earned in that CD, whereas that 20% would stay in the annuity contract, and you get to earn money on the money that you would have paid in taxes. So it kind of helps to add a little bit of compound effect to the MYGA in your favor. Now, let's be clear that when you take money out of an annuity contract, unless you annuitize. Now, what's the term annuitize means? It says, hey, I've got $100,000 built up in this annuity. Let's say that $50,000 of it is principal and $50,000 of it is earnings. If I annuitize, what's going to happen is the government says that we get to take half of that payment that we take out as principal and the other half as interest, which gives us what's called the exclusion ratio and can help us to mitigate taxes. Whereas if we just take free withdrawals, the government says, hey, last in, first out, LIFO. So you have to take interest out first and you're going to pay it that way. Now, I don't recommend that people necessarily annuitize an annuity and use that exclusion ratio. There's times that it makes sense, but many times it does not. But again, you do get an advantage in the annuity contract of tax deferral and compounding on what you would have paid to the government.
And another strategy for MYGAs, as with other annuities, of course, you can ladder those. You can do 3, 5, 7 years, that sort of thing. They are a great alternative to bonds and CDs. They often do get higher fixed rates than CDs, and they're used as an alternative for retirees seeking fixed income investments. So those are some of the positives. What are some of the negatives that we should know about with MYGAs?
Well, the negative always comes in, anytime you buy protection, you give up something, right? If you're going to have protection, you have to probably sign up for a time period. And so those time periods can run anywhere from 1 year to 10 years. There's one company out there right now that has a 2-year annuity at 5.2%. So it renews every couple of years and pretty much is going to follow whatever the Federal Reserve is going to set the rates at with a little bit of lag. both positive and negative. So I guess the biggest thing is they're a little bit illiquid. If you pass away, let's say you have a 10-year annuity and you take one out and in year 2 you pass away, there's no surrender charge, there's no penalties or anything for that death benefit to be paid to your beneficiaries. If, however, you're going to cash out early from that MYGA, it may actually cost you a penalty to get out. It just depends on the situation and if your particular MYGA that you bought would have any type of market value adjustment based on interest rates.
What about liquidity with MYGAs or basically any annuities?
Most are going to give you 10% per year free withdrawal right out of the box. There are some that will make you wait a year. Some will give it to you right up front. There are other ones that will allow you to stack for a couple of years your 10%. So you might get one that would say, hey, rather than just 10%, if you wait 2 years, you can have 20% in a chunk. There are a few out there that used to give you a little bit more than that, but that's kind of a moving target. For the most part, I think the biggest thing people need to think about is, yes, you're going to get a guaranteed rate, and that's great. But if you're looking to take that money and spend it next year, don't sign up for a 5-year contract.
Yeah, I understand completely. So MYGAs are out there, but there are also fixed index annuities, and there are fixed annuities. There are different types of annuities. When do you think someone should consider a MYGA versus any other sort of an annuity? What would the situation be where a MYGA would fit the bill?
Right. So if somebody's looking for a guaranteed amount of income, they're looking for safety and they're looking for tax deferral and also to pass those assets along to their loved ones, they can do that. Some people say, well, the annuity doesn't get the tax advantage of a stock or a bond. Well, the other thing is that they haven't considered the taxes you will pay along the way on the stock and the bond if you're getting dividends and interest payments, plus any market appreciation unless you pass them at death. And then even at death, there's ways through annuity contracts to do what's called a post-death 1035 exchange. Basically what that says is it's a tax-free exchange to go to the new owner or owners, whoever your beneficiaries may be, and help us to mitigate and delay taxes that way.
Also, if you have aged out of other types of investments, MYGAs can be written upwards of 100 years old. If you need something beyond 85, there's a lot of investments that you can't do beyond that level, and some are even beyond 80. And so MYGAs, a lot of them can be written upwards to 100, maybe even beyond.
We're talking about multi-year guaranteed annuities with Randy and Jake of Floyd Financial Group, otherwise known as MYGAs. If you have questions about MYGAs or any other sort of annuity or any other sort of investment to put you on a path towards a confident retirement, again, we invite you to give us a call here at Floyd Financial Group. You can do it this weekend if you'd like. Our number, 417-889-7233. When you call, leave your name, telephone number. It'll take you about 60 seconds to do that. Ashley will call you back during the week and set up a time for you to sit down with Randy and Jake at Floyd Financial Group and get your questions answered about pretty much anything. We can certainly talk about taxes. We can talk about annuities. We can talk about income planning. We can talk about estate planning. You name it, we probably can talk about it because we've been doing this for many, many years, serving the people here of the greater Springfield area. So again, think of it as just a friendly conversation between you and a family member, because many of our clients here at Floyd Financial Group are actually like family to us. We would like to invite you into the family by calling 417-889-7233. You can also find out more about us online at floydfinancialgroup.com. So Randy and Jake, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you joining me. For Jake and Randy, I'm Jeff Shade. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again next week right here with another edition of Show Me the Money on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk. The information provided in the preceding program is for educational purposes only and is not intended as investment advice for any individual or entity. All information contained herein is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representations as to its completeness or accuracy. The opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice. Please consult your financial professional before executing any financial strategy. Financial planning is